Hi and welcome to another video by Jim the Car Guy. Today we have a 97 Toyota Camry. The problem we have today is that the vehicle is overheating. Once it runs, the temperature gauge starts to climb and the customer sees some liquid on the ground. It's pretty clean cut, the radiator is leaking, but the problem we're going to run into with this particular vehicle is not only is the radiator leaking, but inside the radiator it looks like mud inside there. When you grab the upper radiator hose and you squeeze them, sorry, my boss just walked in the door. When you grab the upper hose and you squeeze it, you could feel like this crackling inside the hose. So I know all this sediment in there is actually dried up and causing a problem. So we are going to change the radiator. We're going to change the upper and lower hose. We're going to replace the thermostat and gasket, the radiator cap, of course. And we're also going to change the fan control switch because that's located in the radiator. You're probably saying to yourself, why are you going to change all these parts on an older vehicle? I'm going to show you now why. The antifreeze that's in there is like mud. All right, let me bring you out and show you what it looks like. Okay, this is what the radiator looks like. As you can see, all of that on there looks just like somebody threw mud inside there. You see all of that stuff? That's all inside throughout the whole cooling system. That's why I'm going to replace the thermostat as well. The leak, you can see it down on the lower part of the cover right there. It's leaking in the radiator. Once I get that shroud off, I'll show you where it's coming from. Same thing down in there on the very bottom, you can see that. All right, so basically what we're going to do, first thing we're going to do is going to drain the radiator out. And the way you do that is down on the very bottom, down underneath here, there's a drain valve. We're going to open that valve up and let it drain into a suitable container. All right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to take off the radiator hose here and here. We're going to also take off the lower hose right here. You can use regular pliers on this too. We're going to take this hose off here and relocate it. We're going to remove these two brackets here and here, and we're going to disconnect the cooling fans here and here, here and here, and we're going to take these fans and move them out of the way so we can get the radiator out. So as far as the thermostat is actually located right back in here, and we're going to take that thermostat out as well. So, all right, let me show you what tools you're going to need, and we're going to get started. This is just an example of what you're going to need. You're going to need a ratchet, whether it's a flex head or a straight head, some extensions, a couple of screwdrivers, pliers, possibly cutting pliers, and I always use a 1/4-inch set to take those 10mm bolts out of the cooling fans. So, all right, let me put a pair of gloves on and let's get started. Okay, I'm just going to loosen up that drain valve on the bottom. I'm going to let the antifreeze drain into a container. When I call it antifreeze, it actually is, it's not even really antifreeze, it's like mud. All right, while that's draining out now, I'm going to come up here and take off these 10mm screws right here that we talked about. We'll just take this up, squeeze this together. We'll take that off and just locate that to the side for now. Don't lose the screws because you're going to need to put these back in there, obviously. And we're just going to unplug the electrical connectors. And the way you unplug them is a tiny little plug right here on the side. You push it in and you pull it off and it comes right out. Just like that. Same thing on this side over here, but we're going to need to take this hose off here. So you're just going to push that little clip in on the side. Okay, so now our fan is loose here. We're going to unplug another electrical connector. And now this fan is ready to come out too. We'll need to take this hose off. You just take a pair of regular pliers. And you can take this hose clamp right off like this. And then we can just take the fan shroud out. Unplug all your wiring. Now I'm going to take out these two screws right here. These are both probably 12 millimeter. Oh. Hang on for 1 second. Let me just grab that. I'm just going to take these two brackets off right here. They're probably 12 millimeters. Next thing we're going to do is let's get this hose here out of our way. Basically all we're going to do is just take the other clamp off over here. Next thing we're going to do then is we're going to come down underneath here and we're going to disconnect that clamp right there, and we're going to disconnect this clamp right here. That's for the cooler hose for the transmission. This is the sensor for the coolant fan, so we're going to replace that also. We're going to take this clamp here off, and we're just going to open this up right here. And the way you do that is just get in here with a screwdriver, and you can pry this open like that. And we're going to save this too. We're just going to move that to the side. All right, we're going to take that clamp off right there, and we should be able to get the radiator out. Now these clamps down here can sometimes be a real pain in the rear end because they're so badly rusted. So we're going to try to get them off the best we can. Okay, now we have both of those hoses disconnected. They can be a pain in the ass, a pain in the rear end. Next thing we're going to do is take this other hose clamp off right here. Hose, and then we can lift the radiator right out just like this. Okay, we'll bring you over there. Oh. Look at that condenser right here, huh? That condenser shot too. Bet you the AC doesn't work that good. Look at this. What happens when they get older, they start to come apart. All right. Let's get set up and we'll take the thermostat out and we'll change the thermostat next. Okay, the first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna take out these bolts that actually hold the thermostat in place here. This one and the one on the bottom right there. Remember, I like to use a 1/4 inch because I don't want to take a chance on breaking these off. They're such a small little bolt. They're only 10 millimeters, so be very careful with them. You don't want to break them. Now, as you can see, you're not going to get in here with a regular ratchet like this. It's going to be crooked. So what you're going to do, you can get in there with a wrench and just break the bolt loose. And then you can either turn it out with the wrench as you're doing it, or you can get in there with a ratcheting wrench. And we can pull the thermostat housing right off. And we can get our thermostat out. I might add, make sure you have a bucket down below, which is what I have there. And I'm going to show you why I wanted to change the thermostat. You see what that looks like? That's all that sediment in here from not changing our antifreeze properly. You see how it's rubbing? You see how it's rubbing up against the side of that thermostat? See that shiny area right there? This thermostat could be binding, so it's already empty. You may as well go ahead and change it now anyway. Now, this, I am going to take this over. I'm going to clean it off on the wheel. But this here, the sediment that's on here like this, make sure you clean that off. You're going to have a leak with when you put the hose back on. So now, there's different ways you can clean it. You can clean it with a scraper. such as this, right? Cleans it up really well. Or you can run it off on the wheel, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to clean out this right here. I'm going to clean this off here. I'm going to clean this off here, and then we're going to come right back. Okay, before you put everything back together, always make sure your radiator is the correct radiator. Make sure your lines are in the correct locations, both lines. As you can see, everything is in the right location. I did install our new coolant fan sensor. That's in here also. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put that thermostat back in, and then we'll put the radiator back in. So, all right, let's continue. Okay. Now, when you get your new thermostat, you have to put your gasket around the thermostat. It just fits right into that little groove there. Just like that. Then we cleaned up our housing. Put your thermostat into the housing like this. And now we can place the thermostat back in the where it came out. You want to hold the thermostat housing in place till you get the screws caught so that the thermostat doesn't fall out. Now we're just going to snug it down. I just want to mention this also. I did clean up the engine housing itself too, to make sure all of the gasket material was off of it and there was no erosion on there whatsoever. Now remember, you're going into quarter inch, you're going into it's a very small 10mm bolt. Don't over tighten it and break it. Okay, and that's it, thermostat's in. Next thing we're going to do now is we're going to put a radiator in here. Now, I just want to point this out to you. These little pieces down on the bottom here have to fit into little rubber bushings down there. If those bushings came off of the other radiator, you need to put them back in there first. All right? Now our radiator's pushed back in. We're going to put our two brackets back on here. We're just going to catch these by hand until we get the other side on. Okay, now we can tighten them up.
You know what? That's what it is. You can. You know what? That's what it is.
Okay, so now the radiator's tight. Now before we put the shroud and the fans and everything back in, we're going to reconnect those hoses on the bottom for the transmission cooler. We are going to change those clamps because they were so badly rotted out. Okay, trans cooler line's on. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to reattach the wire that was actually to the sensor. And we're just going to leave that sit for now. Let me bring you in there, I'll show you. See? Make sure it's snapped back in place. Put the little clip back in here. And we're going to leave this off to the side for now until we put our shroud back in. We can lay our cooling fan back inside. Now remember, this wire was attached inside that shroud, so you have to put that back on once you get it in place. We're not going to tighten these screws in tight yet. We're just going to screw them in by hand for now. Okay, and once you have both of them caught, then you can tighten these screws in at 10 millimeter. So don't over tighten them and break them, just snug them in. Same thing here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to reattach those wires down the bottom that we unplugged. They were stuck in the shroud. Now we're going to plug both of those plugs back in that we previously unplugged. These two right here. Now you can't make a mistake. They can only plug in one way, so we're going to plug them back together. Listen for it to snap in, and now that's finished. Now we're going to put our other one in here. Remember, these little pins right here have to line up with the holes down the bottom. Snug these up again. Make sure you plug your plug back in on the side right here. 1 second, be right back. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, okay, make sure your plug goes back in, push it in. You're going to take your hose that you previously took off, put it right back on here. Make sure you have your little clamp back in place. Push this in here, and now we're ready to put our hoses back on. So let's grab the hoses and we're going to continue that. We are going to use new clamps because they were so badly rusted. Let's just recap what we did now. Okay. We made sure that we put the cooling fans back into the little shroud where it belonged. We reconnected our transmission cooler hoses down here. We put new clamps on them. We attached our cooling fan here, and here, here, and here. We made sure our plug is plugged in there, and both plugs are plugged in there. We reattached the cable into the holder where it belongs. Our hose clamps are tight. Our thermostat is actually in there nice and snug. And now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to fill this up with antifreeze, and then we're going to start it and let it run. So let's grab that antifreeze. All right, now that we have all of our stuff is out of the way here, we're going to start this up. We're going to let it run a little bit, and then we'll finish it off. This is running. We're just going to make sure that there's no visible signs of leakage anyplace, and then we're going to let it run, top off the antifreeze level, make sure our cooling fans come on. So we'll let the cooling fan comes on and we'll come right back. Okay, now that we got the radiator filled up, we have the cap on. We're letting it run till it gets hot. The only other thing we're going to make sure is that these cooling fans here and here turn on when the vehicle runs hot. So take a look and see inside what it looks like. We still got a ways to go yet. We're only at about halfway. So we'll come back when then, you know what? We're just going to let it run for a little bit and make sure the cooling fan comes on. You do the same. Make sure your cooling fans come on. Make sure your antifreeze is full in your overflow. And in a day or so, you'll probably have to check the antifreeze level again just to top it off. Before you let it go, just make sure that there's no leaks anywhere, that everything is nice and dry. We're going to rinse it down with some water to get rid of that residual antifreeze that's laying on the frame there. We're going to make sure the cooling fan comes on, and we're out the door. Okay, we're just going to let this run for a little bit now. We're going to make sure the cooling fans turn on and off just the way they're supposed to. But we're going to have to wait a little bit for that temperature to come up because it's probably about 45 degrees outside today, so it is going to take a while to heat up. Just make sure that your cooling fans come on and off the way they're supposed to. Top your antifreeze off in a couple of days just to make sure you're full. Look everything over that you did to make sure there's no leaks, and that's it. You're all set. If you have any questions or you need any advice, send me an email. I'll be more than happy to talk to anybody about anything. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.